Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. Hey guys, we're your hosts, M and J, and today we're looking at the first episode of Masters of the Universe Revelation. This show's a mess. First of all, it had a nightmare PR campaign, they directly contradict their own continuity, and they really didn't get the characterizations down. Things happen mostly for shock value, but it doesn't actually make sense when you think about it. I'm also not really sure who this was made for. I probably wouldn't recommend it for young kids because of the content, and despite the fact that it was billed as being for fans and newcomers alike, that's just not the case in the end. The original show never got a proper finale, so they billed this show as said finale, that it would pick up directly where the Filmation cartoon left off, and that's the way it was marketed since it was announced. It wasn't until a few weeks before the show premiered that they admitted that this wasn't the case. Why they didn't just bill the show as its own continuity is beyond me, but then they got mad when people were upset that it wasn't like the 80s show, despite the fact that they're the ones who put that expectation on us to begin with. And that's not the only thing they lied about. I can guarantee this show would not have received such backlash if they had just been upfront from the beginning, instead of using such deceitful tactics. Sure, it would still have characterization problems, but at least it wouldn't have been hypocritical for them to make a show about the consequences of lying, only for them to not be able to accept the consequences of their own lies. It's all pretty ironic. The show's also not newcomer friendly. It basically expects you to know these characters and what's going on. It does give you a brief rundown at the beginning, but then it just throws us into the deep end with very little setup, and this might have worked if it actually was a sequel series, but it's not, and the people who aren't familiar with the show are probably going to have a hard time getting invested. Regardless, the show on its own has a lot of problems. It's really obvious that they don't understand these characters or their relationships to each other, both within the Masters of the Universe franchise as a whole and within this show's specific continuity. Some of the characterizations in the prequel tie-in comic don't match the show. I think it would have been better also if they had had the comic out and done before the show started, but I also think it would have been better if they had dropped all 10 episodes at once instead of splitting it into 2 parts. Basically, there's a lot of things they could have done differently, but this is what we got stuck with in the end. The story begins with the kingdom celebrating Tila being promoted to Man-at-Arms.
Woman-at-Arms.
No, just Man-at-Arms. Sorry, 1987 Tila. We get a very brief introduction to the characters and also some exposition. Elsewhere, He-Man and Strider, instead of Battle Cat, have taken Spikor and Clawful prisoners and are bringing them to Castle Grayskull. The sorceress lowers the drawbridge even though she flies out of the skull's eye and confronts the group. Spikor reveals he's actually Skeletor in disguise, but the sorceress immediately blasts him, asking if he really thought that his ruse could fool the sorceress of Grayskull. But if she knew it was Skeletor, maybe she should have given He-Man a heads up. They can communicate telepathically, so maybe she could have reached out to him and warned him that that was actually Skeletor in disguise. And then she could have realized that that's not He-Man, since she would have ended up reaching Adam, who is at the celebration for Tila, which would have let both of them know that something was very wrong. The He-Man who's with the sorceress is actually Faker in disguise, and he grabs her while she's not paying attention to him. But not only is that not He-Man, it turns out Clawful is actually Evelyn in disguise. And Strider was Nightmare. And now they're all in Castle Grayskull. How is she able to see through Skeletor's disguise and no one else's? Still, it really should have been enough to not open the drawbridge and let He-Man know something was wrong. But now Skeletor's opening the secret passage to the heart of Grayskull, and his whole army is outside. Great job, sorceress. It cuts back to the ceremony, where Tila's about to be knighted as Man-at-Arms. This whole scene is about how great Tila is, since she went from being a little orphan girl to the captain of the Royal Guard, and now she's being promoted again, which would all be fine except Randor makes this really unnecessary comment to Adam. Queen Marlena notices how proud Duncan is, and Randor says that that's parental pride and someday he hopes to feel that towards Adam, and is very dismissive of him. Not only is this really rude, but it also makes no sense for Randor to say this, because it contradicts the way he acted in the tie-in comic. There it delves into Prince Adam and King Randor's relationship. Randor tells Adam that he secretly always wanted to be the champion, but eventually came to understand his true destiny was to be king, and he tells Adam that he knows he'd rather be serving in the Royal Guard, but his destiny is greater than that. But his attitude here is the complete opposite. Now he's asking why Adam can't be more like Tila. Where did that come from? He seems so understanding in the comic. But Tila's about to be knighted, and she and Adam smile at each other, which I thought was nice. But then Adam finally gets the call from the sorceress, which she should have done a long time ago, but but he lets Duncan know the sorceress is in trouble, so he rallies the troops and lets Tila lead the charge. Adam sends Orko to help the sorceress, and then transforms into He-Man. This is the only time we actually get to see him transform in part 1. The sequence itself is very shiny, although I would have preferred if they'd been a little truer to the original. It's more Sailor Moon than He-Man, but they're off to join the fight. After fighting their way through Skeletor's forces, Tila and Duncan make it to the castle. Skeletor's already deep within the castle, but Faker is trying to break through the sorceress's shield, so Duncan just slices him in half with his laser. Well, that was easy. Somehow the sorceress couldn't just do that herself. Evelyn comes out of hiding and attacks them, but Orko takes the blast, and also takes himself out of the fight. You did good, little buddy. Tila knocks her out of the fight, but then Nightmare goes after them. Duncan says he can handle the robot horse while Tila goes to look for Skeletor. Duncan, just laser him in half like you did Faker. His mangled body is right behind you. Duncan's really gonna miss out on the final battle just because of Nightmare? That's a real letdown. Tila goes deeper into the castle and does run into Skeletor, who is annoyed that she's not He-Man. Maybe by the end of this series she will be. And he calls her just his cheerleader. Personally, I feel like Tila and Skeletor have clashed enough that he wouldn't just think of her as a cheerleader. He knows she's the captain of the Royal Guards. Even if he doesn't know about her recent promotion, he still respects that. But I guess that's just my opinion. But He-Man comes in before Skeletor can blast her with the Havoc Staff. Evelyn has recovered from Tila kicking her into a wall earlier, and she joins the fight. I guess Duncan is still stuck fighting Nightmare and she was able to just slip past them. Still disappointing. But the ensuing fight is pretty cool. I guess it had to be. This is where all the trailer footage came from. During the fight, Skeletor has the chance to grab the Sword of Power, but suddenly he gets wrapped up in a bunch of vines, and it turns out to be Mossman, who is voiced by Alan Oppenheimer in this series, which was really cool because he voiced Skeletor in the original Filmation cartoon, along with a bunch of other characters, and we were really happy to see that he was included in this new series. He tells Skeletor to leave this place, only for Skeletor to kill him off in one shot. He had like 2 seconds of screen time. What was that? We did see Skeletor throw fire a little bit earlier in the fight. Mossman didn't consider that at all. He-Man gets pretty upset, which is understandable, but then he rushes Skeletor and stabs him through the abdomen, which completely destroys his character. I know Kevin Smith was really annoyed by the original Filmation cartoon because they never stabbed each other and he felt like they really should be, and he chalked it up to the show being for babies. And it is true, this show was meant for children, and the censors were very strict about how swords could be used, which was don't. No stabbing. Very strict rule. But it was more than the censors keeping He-Man from stabbing people. He-Man doesn't kill. Skeletor ends up dangling from a cliff in the episode The Dragon Invasion, and He-Man saves him. Skeletor calls him a fool and says that he wouldn't have saved He-Man if the roles were reversed. But He-Man says that the difference between the two of them is that he values life, even Skeletor's. And in the problem with power, Skeletor tricks He-Man into believing he killed someone, and he's so distraught by this situation that he gives up being He-Man. Adam would never use the sword to take a life. He would find another way, even if it was Skeletor. Even after Skeletor has done something truly awful. This is like having Batman use guns and kill people. It just wouldn't happen. They already had the sorceress make really silly mistakes for the sake of the plot, and now they have He-Man go for a killing blow for the sake of the plot, and Kevin Smith's deep desire to see Skeletor and He-Man stab each other, and sacrificing He-Man's character in the process. It turns out Skeletor was standing right in front of the keyhole, so when He-Man stabbed him through, he stuck the sword into it, unlocking the box and revealing the magical orb that the Council of Elders put all their magic into. So basically this is Mossman's fault for putting him in front of the box to begin with. He might as well have not shown up at all. He was totally useless and put Skeletor right where he wanted to be. Convenient. And then he died immediately. What a waste of a character. Also, he got an action figure in Wave 1, but Tila didn't, despite the fact that Mossman just shows up to die, and Tila's the main character. At least we get to see him again in the afterlife. Not that it helps any, but we'll cross that rainbow bridge when we get there. Evelyn tries to use her magic to help Skeletor, but he stops her since he has his own plans. The exterior of the castle fades away, revealing the Hall of Wisdom, and Skeletor monologues, which gives the heroes ample opportunity to do anything to restrain him, but no, they just let him smack the orb with the Havoc Staff. He was monologuing. They could have done anything. Hold him down. Stab him again. Whatever you need to do. Our heroes, everybody. everybody. Why did he smack the orb anyway? Why not just grab it and take it for himself? The sorceress stops time and explains that what Skeletor has done is basically going to destroy the universe because of the magical kickback. Then Tila asks a really stupid question for no reason. She asks what the point of bringing them there was if they're all gonna die anyway. Obviously, they were supposed to prevent this from happening, but instead they just stood there and let Skeletor do whatever he wanted. And now we're here. Luckily for the universe, He-Man comes up with the idea of using the sword as a conduit to channel all the energy through that. That way, instead of destroying the universe, he'll just destroy himself. But before he does this, he asks the sorceress if he could call on the power of Grayskull while in this form, which is just there to let Tila know that this isn't his normal form. He's literally called on the power just to open the drawbridge of the castle.
By the power of Grayskull, I command the drawbridge. Open!
So time unfreezes, and he uses a sword to absorb the magic, which makes it split in two, which we saw in the tie-in comic, how it's made from two separate swords. It's also a nod to the original toy line, which also had two swords that came together to make one, and it's cool to have a nod to that, even if I don't particularly care for how they use it here. Anyway, Duncan finally shows up, just in time to see He-Man die. He ends up transferring back into Adam though before he goes. I don't know if it's because the sword split in two. Normally he has to say let the power return in order to transform back, but everybody else sees him, including Skeletor, and surprisingly he takes it better than Tila does, although he also dies, so... He grabs onto Adam in an attempt to wrestle the swords away from him, although he's already injured, so that doesn't work. So they both get vaporized and nothing is left aside from the head of the Havoc staff, and a smudge on the floor. I know we're supposed to care, but I just feel like this moment is forced. Leading up to it, the characters made some pretty glaring mistakes, plus He-Man's actions were out of character, so Adam ends up getting sidelined, and Tila is the new main character of this part. But Kevin Smith totally didn't lie. He-Man doesn't step aside, he dies. That's totally not the same thing. Everyone heads back to the castle and Duncan informs the king and queen that He-Man succumbed during the battle. Queen Marlena knows what this means and she immediately starts sobbing, but Randor never figured out that Adam is He-Man, so he just gives a few words about how he'll be rewarded in Preternia, a Valhalla-like afterlife for all the champions of Grayskull. But Marlena reveals the truth that Adam is He-Man through her sobbing, and boy is it all downhill from here. Both Randor and Tila take this very hard as they figure out that they were the only ones who didn't know, at least of everyone in the room. Duncan says it's because Prince Adam ordered them to keep it secret, but that's not what we saw in the comic. Adam actually wanted to tell Tila and his father, but the thing is, it's not his secret to tell. In the comic, Randor ends up in a coma, and He-Man is afraid that he'll die without him ever finding out that his son was He-Man. But the sorceress lectures him, saying that it's important that he keeps his secret and not tell anybody, and when he tries to tell Tila, Orko stops him in order to keep the secrets of Grayskull. The comic makes a big deal about explaining why they keep this secret, because King Grayskull didn't keep it secret, and because of that his children were targeted and his son was killed. Ever since then it's been a big secret, one that the sorceress is very adamant is not shared. And yes, it is true that a few people know, but that was largely because of accidents, rather than choosing to trust some people over others. But here they're totally throwing Adam under the bus, and it's not fair because he isn't here to defend himself. But it seemed like Randor understood this, because in that conversation he had with Adam, he explained that He-Man has these burdens and secrets that he has to carry that the king should never know. So it's really weird when he flies off the handle and starts screaming at Duncan. He strips him of his title and banishes him from the palace, and tells him that if he ever comes back again he'll be executed. Then he demands that Tila take her father away. Where is all this coming from? I understand being upset, but not like this. You'd think he would be upset about how he treated his son earlier, which was also out of character, but he's basically putting all the blame on Duncan, which makes no sense. But it wouldn't be the first thing in this episode that doesn't make sense. But now it's time for Tila to throw a temper tantrum. She yells at the queen for figuring out that Adam was He-Man and not saying anything, even to her husband. I'm surprised she's not banished for yelling at the queen like that. Then she yells at everybody, claiming they've all been lying to her whole life. And she says she's put her life on the line for a pack of liars, and that Adam was no different. I thought she was putting her life on the line for the sake of Eternia, because if Skeletor took over, everyone would be suffering. The royal family, the people of Eternia, her. This secret does not change all that. She says that she's had enough of everything. Grayskull, the royal palace, palace, magic and the monsters it creates, which is weird because she's fought technology too. It's not like magic just creates monsters and nothing else, and monsters only come from magic. But she throws her headpiece down and storms out, turning her back on everyone and everything. This whole situation is the last thing that any of them should be doing right now. Eternia lost Prince Adam, who is next in line for the throne, and I guess Adora doesn't exist in this continuity, or maybe they haven't found her yet? The point is she's not here, or available. They should be coming together to fight for the future, but instead they're turning their backs on each other and banishing each other. Orko tries to reach out while she's leaving, saying that they can get through this together, but she doesn't care about any of that. She's a lot worse than Amber in this situation. At least Amber was just a teenage girl who broke up with her boyfriend, but Tila is proving that she was not fit to be promoted. Maybe she was physically ready, but she sure was not mentally. She gave up on years of being captain of the Royal Guard and this new promotion just because of a secret that was not anyone's place to tell her. She was trained for this her entire life, way before Adam was even He-Man. She was captain of the Royal Guard for years, and now she's walking out on her friends, family, career, and Eternia. I understand this is a really tough and confusing situation, and one with a lot of emotions mixed together, but I just can't support her on this. Not only is she making a huge mistake, but it's just so unbelievable. It doesn't feel natural, it just feels forced. But that's where the episode ends. This is the triumphant return of Masters of the Universe. Thanks. This was a very rocky start to Revelation. It had no regard for the source material, or even their own continuity. I'm honestly not sure why they even released this prequel comic. They only released one issue before the series actually started, and all it ended up doing was making the characters look bad. Things happen more for shock value or to get the characters where the writers want them to be, instead of things progressing naturally. Characters end up making nonsensical decisions or getting held up on some arbitrary thing. The people behind the show went on and on about how they're such big fans, and if you don't agree with their decisions or their vision, then you're not a real fan. But it's pretty obvious from watching it that they themselves don't know these characters very well, and they're just making their own headcanons and edgy fanfiction a reality. But this definitely was not the show we'd been waiting for. But this is only the beginning of Revelation, and it doesn't really improve from here. Personally, we'd rather stick with the OG show or the 2000X reboot. The OG may be corny, but it still has a lot of fun and adventure, and the 2000X show managed to update it but also stay true to the original, while this one did neither of those things, at least in our opinion. But what did you guys think of Revelation? Did you enjoy it, or are you not a fan? Let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Before we go, we'd like to give a shout out to our members: Caleb Nelson, Stutania, Tyrant Carnivore, Adam K, Shiny Orc Boy, The Rabbit Mancer, Hunter Rose, General Bolivar, Depth Charge Media, Samaru163, Kopitio Bozinski, Gabby Hime, Sandy Martin, Verdant Range, Butcher7 Actual, Dashhound, and Bandito Bane. Thank you all so much for the support. If you'd like to become a member, you can hit the join button next to the subscribe button. We also have a buy me coffee if you want to support us that way. But if you enjoyed this video, you can leave a like and subscribe to the channel to see more content from us. That helps us out a lot too, and it's free. So thank you all again, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye everyone. Bye guys.